Says your back's no.
Oh, there you go.
Now we're live. Can you not let me in?
Ugh. Let's roll here. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome. Hopefully, I don't see this. Let me hit the refresh. Make sure I'm live on YouTube. I'm not sure. It looks like you are. Yeah, but does it see our faces? All I see is the what's going on. Uh, Rested. It's there. What's going on, Mama? Good to see you. Your camera's not on. Welcome, everybody. I gotta light some sage. It has been a long day. Has been a long weekend. Lots of family drama. So I'm just gonna. Okay, great. Thank you, Mama, for letting me know. And I don't know if people can see on YouTube. I'm not even sure. I said this last time. I was like, if I'm streaming on silent, I apologize because I'm still learning this whole thing. Let me see. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. I don't see. I see I just see the cover for YouTube. Can you see it on YouTube? Well, maybe let me sign out of my regular channel because I'm okay. Sorry, guys. Samiyyah, you're frozen or something. Let's switch account here. Welcome, everybody. We're gonna do a live Q&A. Oh, there you are. You were frozen on IG. Yeah, I kind of went to check. Instagram. Oh. YouTube, but okay. That's on. Okay. I'll need to keep it up then. All right, everybody. Thank you for being a little bit patient as we sort of set up the stream. These are some, I'm an 80s baby, so this tech stuff takes me a little while to get used to. I really appreciate y'all joining us this evening. What's going on, Carisha? What's up? So today we're going to have a candid conversation. I had asked my well, actually, I said I was going to go live. So if you see me, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth. I said I was going to go live and kind of tell more a bit about my story. Because I feel like a lot of people don't really know kind of like how'd I get here? And I get sometimes questions of like, oh, how did you start doing the work that you're doing and all this other stuff. So I got this new sage. I forget what it's called. It's all blue. And so I asked, I was telling her about this and she sort of inserted herself. What's going on, Sutton? She sort of inserted herself and said, oh, I can interview you, right? And yeah, you're gonna have to mute yourself. And so we're here. We're here. And I'm pinning myself. Before I introduce her and get her on, I do want to say that today is the last day to join Thrive, my new community membership. We got some folks already who said yes. Yeah, I think it might be. That's Egyptian Blue Lotus. I think that, yeah. I forgot because I've been hiding it for a while, this sage. So I'm not sure, Carisha. I'll find out though. I just pulled it out today. Yeah, but today's the last day to join Thrive, my membership community. It really is a community where people are just committed to overcoming their fears, their self-doubts, and their perceived limitations. And together we're going to do coaching, monthly curated master classes and hot seat coaching and all that stuff. Perfect, because I was feeling a little, because it's been such a long day. So I'm glad that the smoke is good for anxiety. But yeah, so it's just a community where we're going to come together, where I'm going to coach folks through whatever fears that they're trying to work through, and get personalized coaching with me. And we're going to be meeting. It's a whole community of us just kind of coming together so that we can thrive together. I always say, imagine what we could do together week after week, month after month, year after year, when you have a community with you to sort of help you steer you in the right in the direction that you want to go, not right direction, but direction that you want to go. And a few people have already taken me on that offer, and I'm excited to get started working with them. And so today's the last day to join Thrive as a founding member. And I appreciate those who have already said yes. So if that's something that you're interested in and you see my work and it resonates with you and you'd love for me to coach you through the process, there's a link in my bio. Feel free to join, and I'd love to see you there. So, again, thank you everybody for joining. This is my partner, Samiyyah. Samiyyah, say hello.
Hey everyone, can you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So, Francis is kind of fancy. I don't have any sage, so I'm just gonna chapstick myself. I'm a chapstick myself, guys, and hope I look glossy the whole time. Thanks for having me, Fran. I'm excited to be here. Yes, as you said, I inserted myself into your live on this lovely Sunday. Thanks for saying yes. And I'm excited to just dive into who you are. I know a bit about you, but I feel like I'm always discovering something new. So I'm excited to learn what's new and also share that with your community here today. So, yeah.
Beautiful. All right. So let's get right to it. And of course, if you guys have any questions about anything, or be like, ooh, somebody keep asking her about that, go for it. I told her I'm
Yeah.
like not holding back. You know what I'm saying? What's going on to here? Not holding back. I always say like I'm Haitian, I'm from the Caribbean, and sometimes Haitians, well, at least in my culture, with my family, we like to keep things pretty private. And I've
Mm,
adopted that perspective for a very long time. And I've only in the last few years, I've kind of been leaning towards telling more of my story, just realizing how impactful it is when you hear other people's story and how that sort of can inspire you to, you know, make changes in your lives or head in a different direction and feel like you're not alone in general, right? When we share our stories collectively, we feel like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one going through this process. So I'm trying to. This is my growth area, guys. So here we go. Go for it.
perfect. All right. So I I know I'd like for this to be a bit different from, the podcasts and interviews that you had before. So we're gonna uh kind of consolidate or fast track your journey a bit so that we can allow time for the other questions, the the creamy questions. Oh, yeah, I forgot because I'm like here. All right, hey guys. Okay. So, all right, first let's start by you telling us who is Francis? Like, and I'm always saying that to you, like, who is Francis? And I don't think you emphasize that a lot or share that a lot with the community. So, outside of what you do, who you provide a service to, your clients, all of that, what you share on social media, like, who is Francis? Take all that away. Who are you?
Does anyone ever get nervous when they answer that question? Because you're just like, oh my God, how do I sum this up? What do you want? Blah, blah, blah. So that's how I'm feeling. Who is Francis? Francis is someone, I'll be honest, I mean, I'm naturally a quiet person. I'm introverted. Uh, I'm playful. I have a great sense of humor. But I'm also somebody who is deeply caring, whether it's about my family, very caring, very connected to my family in so many different ways, and just caring about like humanity in general. I feel like that's always just been a theme in my life. Being in this field and doing this work is no coincidence. It's just sort of, I feel like it's been my karmic makeup for a very long time. But Francis is somebody who is uh, kind of can be a lone wolf sometimes. Like if I get too, um, what's that word? If I spend too much time in solitude, it gets real comfortable and cozy. So I always have to sort of like remind myself to get out there, see the world, and connect. But in general, I'm just, I'm also I feel like I'm on a dating site. I'm also a Libra, and I love taking long walks down the but yeah, I'm a Libra. So Libras, like I like to try to keep the peace, balance. I don't like confrontation, but I have learned to sort of turn confrontation into clarifying conversations. As I've heard, I'm sure some of you might have heard me say that from a coach that explained that to me. And, I think throughout my entire life, one of my biggest challenges that I've had to grow through was learning to use my voice. Growing up in a Caribbean household, and this is not all Caribbean households, but this is just my household and my perspective and my culture. Children are seen and not heard. That's what I grew up with, and so I had to spend many of my life just undoing that narrative and learning to use my voice as much as I can. So somebody who prefers to be sort of in the background, and I think life has sort of thrown me in the throes of being seen, and that's been a growth area for me. So I've had to actively and consciously find ways to expose myself to different challenges, and I don't. Sometimes it takes me a little while, but I've learned that like that's the only way that I can grow. And what's going on, Memoth? I always get that wrong, Memoth. But yeah, so that's me in a kind of like in a nutshell. Like I'm real chill. I'm just on a perfect day for me, it's like reading book and writing. I'm so boring, guys. I really am. Reading, writing, and of course traveling as well. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of answers the question. So you talked a little bit about your upbringing and how it was, like, in a nutshell, children should be seen and not heard, and silencing your voice. So what were some of those early, memories that kind of memories or experiences that you had in your childhood and growing up that helped shape who you are today, given, you know, the strict background of your upbringing?
Yeah, so many things. Ooh, where do I start? Look at that, Ferdinand. What's going on, Ferdinand? Ferdinand was our guy in Peru who actually took us on this beautiful hike around Cusco and showed us how to eat. What did we eat while we were over there? We ate some leaves. I think it was more than cocoa
Coca
leaves.
leaves. And then we had, oh, tar, like ash,
Yeah, and something
coca
else that
leaves.
was tasty. It was sweet. It was like the not the stevia, but anyway. Hola, senor. Some of the early experiences that shaped me. Wow. I think, well, like I mentioned one earlier, I was taught not to use my voice in certain aspects. It become being part of an immigrant family. Coming to this country, we're taught not to rock the boat. You know, slide under the radar. So I think that sort of shaped how I am today. A big part of my experiences, one thing my family really valued was community, and they would always have somebody in the house. I'd always turn around and there was always somebody that they were feeding or giving a room to or helping somebody out if they were having any kinds of challenges. So I think that shaped a lot of sort of my caretaking, nurturing kind of characteristic. And I mean, I see that now too. Like I did that as a kid. I'm not as a kid, but like as a young adult growing up, being a mom and just opening my doors to different people. I think that had a huge impact on me. And um, what else had a huge impact on me? This question's a tough one. Um, I think one of the things that I've learned just watching my aunt. I was raised by my grandmother and my two aunts. So one of my aunts was very strict, and then another one was very lax. And then my grandmother was just kind of in between grandma-ish. And I think, one of the things I've watched my aunts do is work really, really hard And what I mean by that, working 2 and 3 jobs, that immigrant narrative, and just my aunt held a lot of just being always in integrity, always making sure like that you weren't obligated to people, that you didn't owe anybody anything else, like your debts were always cleared. And and that was a double-edged sword for me because it taught me to be super independent, but almost to a fault, right? To the point where I felt like I didn't need anybody, that I got this under control. And I had to undo that narrative. And it's still something that comes up ever so often. So I have to be very mindful about it, like allow people to help me and ask for help and all those things. But that has been a huge part of my life in regards to sort of standing strong, because I just saw my aunts just stand very strong through in the face of adversity, in the face of navigating culture, language, and just other sorts of disadvantages that they had to sort of quote unquote fight through. And I felt like I took that narrative on,
Hmm.
and then I had to sort of undo all that as much as I could. So I think those were the biggest ones for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
So growing up in that space, how did do you think that impacted you or kind of moved you into the space of wanting to be an outlet for others? You know, you're in the mental health space, you're in the I'll say, yeah, therapy space. I never know what to really call it, but you're in that space where people come to you to seek help, right? Guidance about their whatever they might be going through in the season of their life that they're in. So do you feel like your background led you into that space?
That's a really good question. Yeah, it did. As a kid growing up, and I don't know if you're going to ask this, but my household was very complicated. I mean, my childhood is very complicated. And I knew because of those complications that um, when I got into psychology, just because I was so interested in psychology, so interested in the mind and human behavior, it was one of my favorite classes in high school, that I was like, okay, I'm going to get into this field, and I'm also going to work with kids, because I knew if I had somebody to talk to growing up, that maybe a lot of the things that happened in my life would not have occurred if I
Mm,
had just a trusted adult that I could actually talk to. Um, I feel like things it would have been a game changer for me in that sense. And so I said to myself that I was going to be that person for another child.
mm,
That I was going to be another person that another young person can just have that candid conversation with. And I just really committed my entire career to do that. And all things shifted and turned. But it really came from that space of isolation and a space of wanting connection, and wanting to be that connection for other young folks.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I can see that. So then how did you, I guess, officially get into this space? And we can kind of fast track some of the you went to school, you went to masters, you moved here, you moved there, because you share a lot of that in other stories too. So I do would like for this, I would like for this space to be just questions that bring about different answers. So yeah, how did you kind of segue into the space of being a, social worker and being that for children? And then also, how that became a lot for you.
Oh man, it's only for this hour. Yeah, I transitioned because I wanted to be a psychologist, right? And then I realized, oh, I didn't want to like be in an office running
Mm,
tests on kids, although valuable, to a certain extent. I didn't want to do that, and I sought out social work because it had that flexibility, and there were so many different things that you could do with it. And I wanted to be out in the field and connecting with people and all that good stuff, and so that's why I chose that field. But even through my experiences in undergrad and graduate school, and having worked in different positions like in hospital settings and group homes, I mean, I've worked in so many different settings that when it was finally time to get that job, it was totally completely different. And I remember during like my few months before I graduated, I had this friend of mine, and he was actually in child welfare. And he was like, Francis, you just gotta go. He's another Haitian guy. He's like, Francis, just you gotta go do this child welfare thing. You can make decent money. It's very stable and all these things. You could work your way up, and 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 he's like, just try it out. And I was like, I don't know. This is sort of like not that's not the trajectory I thought that I was going to go into. And I ended up going into the child welfare space, and I did that for like 6.5 years, and that burnt me out. If anybody knows or familiar with that, it burnt me out. But I understood now when I look back, and I didn't make this connection until later on because I worked in the child welfare field. I worked with foster care youth. I work with residential youth. I work with kids who were never going to go home. And when I look back on my life, that was sort of kind of like my life growing up, living without my parents, kind of like bouncing back and forth through different households between my aunts. And I went to three elementary schools. So I could see how like that sort of kind of played out where, oh, I kind of understand what it means to sort of like pack your bags up and go to another home, and then pack your bags up and then go to another home. And that was sort of like my framework. And so fast forward like 20 years later, I'm over here working with foster care youth. And I didn't understand that connection until later. And but eventually I burnt out from it, especially after I left Massachusetts and got into the DC area, which was a totally different environment. And I pretty much worked myself to the ground. And just watching and being in that space, and anybody who works in that space, and anybody who's sort of like, see you later, mama, thanks for joining. Anybody who works in that space, and anybody who's in this mental health field, you do get a bit traumatized by the work that you do. So if you don't do your own work, you're really going to burn out. And truth be told, I wasn't doing a lot of my own work at the time. And I think about like my experience in grad school and all the things that I learned. I'm like, wait, I didn't learn about all this stuff. And I didn't learn about inner child work. I didn't learn about shadow work. I didn't learn about any of those things
Mhm.
until I sought it out for myself and had to sort of navigate those kind of like uh, in the dark. And I wasn't taking care of myself. I burnt out. I became really apathetic by the work. And it wasn't necessarily like I love the connection with my kids, but it was just a system. If you work in an institution, whether it's education, whether it's government, and I worked for the state. So any big institution, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and the things that was happening just went against what I believed in. And I had a hard time. I was out of alignment with my own morals.
Mhm.
And eventually, some people can look away from that. I couldn't look away from that. I couldn't look away from like sort of being part of a system that was actually causing more damage, more harm than good. It's one of those systems. It's like there's no good way to do any of that kind of work,
Mhm.
essentially. And I no longer wanted to be a part of it. And when after becoming very sort of like apathetic through it all, I realized I was doing a disservice to the people that I was working with, the kids that I was serving, and so I decided that it was time for me to exit the scene. Because if you're going to be in the mental health field, you really have to have that connection. You really have to have a passion for service and a passion for helping folks. And if you don't, then it's really time. It's like, the customer service job. You go in there like, why are you in the customer service job if you don't like talking to people? Like, I mean, I'm calling for
Yeah.
help. You know what I'm saying? Get out. Go like do something else, right? So
Mhm.
and eventually that's what I did. I was like, I'm not connected to this work anymore. I had
Mm.
and that was very hard for me to say because and this was like years after when I finally was able to sort of sit and process everything that I was like, oh, I felt really guilty walking away from what I knew.
Mm.
I think we had this conversation. I wanted to be that person that was oblivious to what was going on behind the scenes. I wanted to be that person walking down the street. Like I said to you, I wanted to be that accountant. He's an accountant. Just, I just want to be an accountant running some numbers.
What's your favorite number?
That's an inside joke, guys. But yeah, I just wanted to be somebody that didn't know all this stuff was happening. But I knew too much at that point, right? But I needed to separate myself from it all because I was literally making myself sick, and I was really suffering deeply from depression and anxiety, and I was just severely dissatisfied and unhappy with my life. And I
Mm,
was like, I have to do something because this isn't working. I don't know what it
mhm.
is, but I got to switch it up. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, I think I wanted to touch on something because you had mentioned about like doing a bit of the work,
Mhm.
right? Like if you don't want to serve, then don't be at the grocery store checking people out. Like, maybe stock the counters or something, right? So I'd like to the shelves. So I'd like to talk about like how, and we can get back into like the next phase of what you just kind of touched on, but like how important is it for you to do the work? And looking back, do you feel like you wish you had a bit of time to transition, from, I guess, from school into like the real DFS job or, um, I guess transition, and I mean like do some of your own work, like understood what was the junk in the trunk that you were bringing with you as you went into this situation? Because working with the children, that's like, it's not an easy task, right? They come with a lot of stuff. I'll just say that. I don't want to, say the wrong thing, but they come with a lot of stuff. And so if you don't have this awareness of you need to take care of yourself first, then there comes that burnout. So talk a little bit about that.
Oh, the junk in my trunk, huh?
Mhm.
Oh, well, I had a lot of unresolved parental trauma that I didn't work through. So
Mm,
when you have unresolved parental trauma and you're working with kids and their parents, you get a bit biased by that situation. As much as I tried to be objective of the situation, there were times where I'm just like, I didn't understand it, or there are times where I sort of might have blamed the parents for the things that they did. So I had a lot of unresolved trauma. And I also had a lot of unresolved rage and anger that
mm,
I didn't deal with my own personal stuff, my own abandonment, growing up with my own sort of parents. And I also, my nervous system was shot. Right. So I was definitely on the side of flight. So just fleeing situations, not really talking about them, not really processing them,
mm,
and just keep going to the next thing. Like, all right, what's next? Okay, yep, next. Oh, I got
mm,
this. Next. And eventually, when you continue to, it's almost like you're carrying a bunch of bricks, and you just say, "Yep, I keep piling on the bricks, keep piling on the bricks." Eventually, your back's gonna give out. And because I had all those unresolved um, traumatic experiences that I never really processed at
mm,
all, I, that added to the burnout. I think burnout is very subtle. And if you're somebody, and I'm also a recovering people pleaser, and so if I felt like being in that field sort of fed me trying to save the world. I did a whole video about like, stop saving the world, but I felt like it definitely fed some of that. Getting satisfaction as if I was doing something. And what happens in a lot of these fields is that people definitely try to heal themselves through these fields uh,
mm,
to a certain degree, not everybody, but I was getting satisfaction from helping those because I was unable to help myself at a certain point
mm,
in my life. So, me being able to feel like some sort of, lack of a better word, I don't want to use the word savior because it wasn't that concrete or I wasn't that conscious of it, but like me going in and trying to do these things sort of gave me some sort of feedback of worthiness and all those other things. And so when I stopped doing the work and all that stuff disappeared, it was like I was left with like who am I without this work? Who am I without these roles and these titles? Like who am I? And it was a lot to sort of run through, and it took me, and I went on this like 7-year journey to figure a lot of this stuff out, and I had to take that space. When I look back, I was like, man, I should have just kind of like taken a sabbatical. Maybe if I knew, if I had the words or the knowledge. You don't know anybody who's taking a sabbatical. You took a sabbatical, right? You took
yeah.
an 18-month sabbatical. So if I had known that I could have taken a mental health leave, I would have done it, right?
Mm,
But people don't talk about stuff like that. People don't offer stuff like that. They don't offer that kind of information because often people don't even know that they can do that. Now I feel like you might know more about it, but back then, like no one was doing that kind of stuff. You just suck it up and you did the work.
Hmm.
But had I known, I would have taken a mental health leave absence to, maybe see a therapist, talk to somebody. But even when I was going through those things, those experiences, and I took that break and I took the 3 years and transition careers, I wasn't even in therapy yet. I was sort of doing my self work. I was like reading books, I was watching YouTube stuff. I was doing my own self work, but eventually I did end up connecting with a therapist. Yeah.
Yeah. So then well, when you decided you were going to leave DFS, you just went straight to where?
It's DCF.
Do
But
DCF. What's DFS?
I don't know. Some other
Somebody Google it and tell us in the chat.
um
DCFS or DCS.
it's okay. DCF.
That one.
After that I went into real estate.
Hmm.
I went into
Hmm.
real estate, and I've mentioned this before if y'all heard some of this story. I went to real estate because I want to own my time. I want the freedom to own my time because I spent a long time where other people told me where to go, how to be, what time I had to be there, how I needed to show up, and I was done with that. I was done. So that was the very most important thing. I wanted my freedom back. And so excuse me, so real estate offered that opportunity. I don't even remember how I even found out about it. I don't even know, like, what did I know about becoming an entrepreneur or selling real estate? I was a social worker. But I was
That's
like, what if,
extreme change too. Like
yeah, it's like,
social to real
opposite
estate.
ends. And so after that, another thing, besides owning my time, I wanted to make more money. My first job out of college, I made $25,000 a year, and I thought it was the best thing. But I was like, oh, eventually, I was like, oh no, I can't survive off this thing. I want to make more money because people in the mental health field are severely underpaid, especially if you're doing direct service, right? If you're doing maybe ad administration or maybe policy work, then maybe you make a bit more money, or if you're in private practice, but you need to be seeing a lot of clients to be even making a living. So severely underpaid. So I got tired of like doing so much and getting little in return. And it wasn't necessarily like I needed to get something. It just, the scales weren't balanced, as a Libra. I felt like things were just not balanced. And so I wanted more money and I wanted my freedom. And so I went off and did real estate for 3 years.
Do you feel like your people pleasing trait back then
Mhm.
played a role in your decision making at that time? Right. So you just left from the the DC, the child welfare system. You left from that straight to real estate. You want to make money, but in the back of your head, it just I gotta make the money. Um, or were there like the family uh talk in the back of your head, well, you have to be in a real job, what is entrepreneurship? Tell us a little bit about that, because I know even now to this day, some of the choices that you make, your family may not understand them, right? So you're like, you're a digital nomad. What is that? Like, you're not making no money, So even back then, was that a loud voice in the back of your mind, or was that just not a factor at all? And you and yourself were thinking about money, and not really thinking at all because you had so many moving parts.
Yeah, it wasn't that it was loud, but it was internally loud. And what I mean by that, growing up in an immigrant household, you go and you get an education. I was first generation college grad, first generation master's degree, first generation of a lot of things. And so it was always in the back of my mind, like, what are you doing, Francis? Like, your family left Haiti to do all these, sacrificed all these things, and here I am, sort of rejecting this. the norm of get a good degree and do all this stuff. I was totally rejecting that. And but at the same time, people are like, who are you to quit your job like that? Like, what are you gonna do? Like, how are you gonna survive? I mean, those are fair questions, right? And I was like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. I had some money saved. But when it comes to your mental health, sometimes you get to a point where you're just like fed up and you're gonna do what you can, as much as you can, just to make it work, because going back is just not an option. It
Hmm.
just wasn't an option for me at that point, because it was just making me sick. And so I could hear that in the back of my mind, and that really definitely impacted my self-esteem a lot, because I felt like almost a failure at the
Hmm.
time. And then it took me so long to sort of get my bearings right and together for real estate, because I went from being this introverted person to having to sort of be extrovert in a way, knocking on doors, cold calling. Like, what is
Hmm.
that? What's going on, Voss? What's going on, Lily? So I had to like be this extroverted person that was not part of my um characteristic. Meet yourself, babe. I don't know. Something. Okay, there you go. But yeah, I had to do all these things that I didn't teach myself how to do. I just kind of threw myself in there, and that was very uncomfortable. So even as I was working as a real estate agent for those 3 years, my self esteem was shot because I couldn't get it right, and but I felt like I just still had to continue. And then all the things that I built was crumbling down around me because income change. I mean, you want to see what you're made of, work off commission. Okay. Work off commission if you were to really want to see what you're made of and understand the value of sort of working in exchange for your value, right? But I feel like everything sort of came together in regards to like later on in life. But I did definitely have that running script in the back of my head, like, who are you to do this? There were so many sacrifices made on your behalf, and why don't you just get a job? You can go get a job. You spent all this money on a degree, and you're not doing it. Those sorts of things. So there was a lot of guilt that I had to work through, and I didn't work through it consciously. Again, I did what I normally did: was I bucked up and got to work, kept just piling things on and piling things on. So there was like several moments of burnout for me. Like, the first was work, and the second one, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, or maybe not, I don't know, but like, was looking at just the mortality of my life, and whether or not, if I left the earth, would I be happy with all the things that I've done? Like, would I be satisfied with how I had been living my life if I were to die today? And that was sort of the question that I was facing at one point in my life. Yeah.
Right. So there was a lot going on. So you went from the children, then you went to real estate, think you were about to make this bag. And then that turned out to be not what you expected at all, because there was a lot of work that you needed to do to build up that consistency or that clientele or whatever. But then you had some major life changes at that moment, right? There was the death of your grandmother, and then,
Mhm.
or was that before?
The death of my grandmother was before.
Okay, so then you had the death of your father,
Hmm.
and then you were also going through a relationship that wasn't so great.
Hmm.
And then you started questioning, really, like, what is this life anyway?
Hmm.
And so what were the thoughts going on internally? And then what decision did you end up making in that moment?
In which moment? Towards the end of those 3 years? Yeah.
Towards when all of that stuff was going on. Your dad passed away, you realized real estate wasn't working, the relationship was heavy,
Yeah.
and you just were like, okay,
I was
gotta go.
pretty numb. I was pretty numb. I'm not gonna lie.
Mhm,
I was numb and apathetic.
mhm,
Um, I felt like I couldn't feel anything at one point.
mm.
And at that time, my son also was actually on his way to. I was becoming an empty nester, so that was another major life shift for me. Because here I was, I got to put a little chapstick because that's what I did. Here I was, here I was, just like 35, going through some really monumental shifts: breakup, death, empty nester. So isolation, grief, sorrow, all of those things, but I couldn't feel anything. I'll be honest with you.
Mm,
I was just kind of in my trauma, but I knew I wanted to feel something. I knew something was wrong, right? I knew something was not right with me at the time. I even, at points of time, I had suicidal ideation. I wondered if I should still be here. Like I questioned even just my own livelihood at points too, because it was just too much. It was sort of like, if anyone's familiar with depression, I had high functioning depression, I call it, because I was still sort of functioning, but kind of like in a daze. It was like a really black, bottomless pit for me. And I didn't know how I was going to get out of this pit. I didn't know how to do that, even as a trained clinical therapist.
mm,
But at that time, I wasn't a therapist. I was just Frances, little girl Frances, going through all these motions, and I didn't have anyone at the time that I could have those kinds of conversations with.
mhm,
And that led me to when I realized, like, okay, Francis, like these thoughts, these emotions, these are out of hand, they're out of control. And I've shared this story, but I sought out, like, okay, who can I talk to? um I think at that point I did finally find a therapist, and then I ended up going on a retreat, and that's what really spearheaded the whole thing. I talk about it a lot because it's so important. I think what is missing for a lot of folks, if they can, it wasn't something I could afford at the time, but I had to do it, to be in such an immersive space where people can actually hold that kind of energy, to hold those kinds of big, massive traumatic feelings. That really made a huge difference for me because I've never had that before. I've never had somebody turn around and say, "Hey, I got you." Like, "Hey, this is what's going on. Hey, this is happening to me too. Hey, it's okay to let out this rage. It's okay to let out all these feelings." And even as I was going through that process, I was still kind of like, because there were skills that I just couldn't. It didn't resonate with me because I was somebody who was sort of closed off, like my heart was closed. So being in a space where all hearts were open was very weird for me and very uncomfortable. But it was something I knew I had to lean into, and I did it as much as I could with the little. I was very uncomfortable, my own like social anxiety, like, oh my god, who are these people, kind of thing. But that experience really spearheaded the whole process for me in regards to realizing, oh, I have a lot of work to do, and it's okay to do this work. It's okay to actually go deep. It's okay to have these really hard conversations about abandonment, about rage, about rejection, about people pleasing, about shame, about worthiness. It was the first time where that space showed me that it was okay between that and my therapist. And I was like, okay, I can finally like begin having these conversations. Yeah.
I love that. So that was the start. Because I think sometimes when people get this, they go into like one workshop or something. It's like, yeah, I'm going to change my life forever. Then you leave the workshop and you come back to reality, and it's like, oh, this is going to be hard, right? So it wasn't just you coming from that, yeah, this is important. I'm ready to do the work. You went back into an environment that still no longer suited you. And so, like, what was your response to that? Because you made another drastic decision to leave, and
I'm
I
seeing a
also
pattern
want
here.
I'm seeing a pattern. So I want to hear also too, like, just before or right after, you get into buying the one-way ticket and you just feeling like, because in a nutshell, as much as you say, yeah, I did that, there was still a bit of I'm running away from something. And I can relate to that because that was a part of my sabbatical too. But running away was that's the only thing I knew to do at that moment. It wasn't like it was running away, but also with intention,
Right.
right? And so you were running away from something, but I want to hear a little more about that. But also all of these decisions you're making, you are a mother,
Yeah.
right? So you are making these decisions and they're impacting you and they're impacting your son. So I want to talk a bit about that because I don't think you really talk about
Mhm.
this other little child you have
Yeah.
on the side of you. So let's talk about that.
Ooh, she put me out there, guys. Yeah, man, those decisions definitely did a number on my son. So I'm trying to say, where do we start? Because you asked two questions and I'm trying to remember them. But
So talk about what was the impact of these decisions on
okay.
your son first, and then we can talk about the Thailand or the one.
Yeah, it was hard for him because we moved around a lot. With each move, I thought it was better, bigger space, moved, better neighborhood, education, school system for him. We moved, um, and then and we moved from Massachusetts to Maryland, just because his relationship with his father was very complicated, and I really got tired of him disappointing him, and I figured if he's very far away from him, we could use the distance as an excuse. So we moved. And so every decision, I said, that boy, man, he's been my rock. And we have a beautiful relationship now. But freshman year for him was very hard. We fought a lot. And so all those decisions, me working a lot, me sort of not being around as much as a single mom, and he had to sort of not fend for himself, but like he learned a lot of independent skills, mainly because that's how I was taught. Like you learn early on how to sort of cook your own meals, wash your own clothes, that sort of thing. So he knew how to do all that stuff. But I think the constant moves and shifts definitely had him withdraw, and also him dealing with sort of like the distance from his father that had impacted him. We were able to get through. I think when I started to do my own work, when I began to sort of recognize some of the stuff, when I began to change, our relationship got better. And we were able to have those kinds of conversations. But I think what really made a lot of things very difficult is when I took that one way ticket to Thailand. And I thought that he would be okay. And he was off and he went to school in a whole new state. And you underestimate that transition from high school to college. And he really struggled. And it took him a long time to share that struggle with me. And we were able to get through it. But I think those decisions definitely had an impact on him. I mean, we were able to talk about it now, and we had like years ago, we had this like heart to heart, and I sort of apologized for a lot of the things and decisions that I made over time. And he's such a forgiving guy. Maybe he underestimates the impact on it himself, and he's gonna have to go through that journey. But we were able to sort of talk it through. But I think me leaving definitely impacted him. He felt, and I actually asked him that a few days ago. I was like, "Yeah, what was that like living down in?" Because he went to school out in Florida. He said the isolation got to him. The isolation really got to him, and he was struggling to keep up with the workload at school. So it was hard to hear that because I know what it feels to go through that isolation myself. So to have him go through that and me not being there was hard. So I had to really work through a lot of mommy guilt for a very long time, and that carried over in so many different ways. But I also think some of those experiences also helped him to grow into himself. And what I mean by that is like because we moved around a lot, like he doesn't fear going to new places. He doesn't fear sort of like he had made a move back to Maryland. He had made a move to California. So I think in some of those adversities, he was able to find his own personal strengths. And because we were so close, we're able to talk through a lot of those things. But yeah, I made a lot of decisions that definitely impacted the stability and predictability of his life, and it's something that I just had to sort of work through with my own mommy guilt. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important because as much as I don't have children, but I feel like I have children because I have nieces and nephews, and I'm really close. I was really, really close to my nieces. And I feel like, you know, the decisions you make also impact the children around you, right?
Mhm.
And so, but yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I wanted to just fast forward to the Thailand thing really quickly because I know we're kind of running out of time, but this kind of takes us on the more the season of your self development and self growth and the spiritual journey of Francis. So I'd like to hear a little bit about that, your time in Thailand.
Oh man. Oh, my time in Thailand was wild. And what I mean by wild is that um let me see somebody in the Instagram comments. I just say I relate to this all on so many levels, and I'm a fellow Libra, so I get it. Understanding both paths, but having to choose one. Child, a Libra man, we just be tripping over ourselves. My time in Thailand was hard. As much fun I had traveling and experiencing the world, but it was severe isolation. And we talked about how you run away from your problems. And when I realized, like, oh, I still have all the problems. They're still here, but just in another country. And that my time in Thailand, I had severe isolation and loneliness. But something just told me, like, because I could have gone home. Like, home, no matter what happens, it's one thing about my family, regardless of the things that we've experienced. Like, I could always go home. Like, we're that much connected. But there's something within me that said, just keep going, no matter how hard this is, no matter how much being by yourself. Through the process, I got disconnected from a lot of friends and a lot of people. And so I didn't really feel very much connected to community and connected to myself. But I think the biggest impact, which was like a double edged sword, was like I got to spend time with myself. I got to hear myself think and feel for the very first time. A lot of things just sort of bubbled to the surface and they had nowhere to go because I wasn't running and gunning. I wasn't like grinding or working hard or, doing real estate, doing all this stuff, working 10, 12-hour days kind of thing. I was I had space to think and feel, which was intense for me. There were lots of crying that happened on that trip. And there was also lots of like, man, Francis, what are you doing? Are you having a midlife crisis? This is ridiculous. Like, get your life together kind of moments. And, but I just kept going forward with it because I felt like this was something that was going to eventually come full circle for me. And I don't think I could have articulated at the time, but I knew it was, as much as uncomfortable it was to sort of be traveling in those different countries by yourself, solo travel for so long, and trying to navigate sort of like just traveling to different countries, as difficult as it was, um, I had to stick it through. And some of the reasons why I stuck it through is because I was like, I read Eat, Pray, Love. It was like, I'm gonna have my own Eat, Pray, Love moment. I'm gonna find all them shamans that she talked about. Well, she only met with one, I think. And I made it. I made a commitment to say, okay, I'm gonna use this traveling opportunity as a way for me to heal some of the stuff that I've been going through. So I went off. I met with some shamans. Did a lot of work with shamans at the time. Did a lot of self work, and all of those experiences ended up leading me to my mentor. But to me, Thailand and being overseas in Southeast Asia was just a moment of solitude, which I needed. I needed desperately. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, is there feedback? I don't know how to change that, but um, let's talk a little bit about the community aspect of that, right? Because you've mentioned a few times where there was this isolation, and you running from one situation to the next situation. How do you feel community has played a part or has, hasn't played a part in, or how do you feel community would have played a positive impact in your life during that time? And I think, just someone like yourself, of your personality, where you feel like, especially with your upbringing, where you felt like you just had to be Frances, and it was Frances doing everything by herself, and not. really feeling like you had that safe space to call upon others and say, "Hey, can you help?" without feeling a backlash of some in some way, shape, or form. So how do you feel like community could have helped you in this journey? And if you remember, but I'll remember to share to re-ask this. But when you do find yourself in spaces where there's community, how are those relationships mirrors for you?
Ooh, child. Okay. Um, I think during Thailand, I don't know if I would have accepted community the way that I did afterwards. I don't know if I was in a place to do that. Trust issues are such a huge thing with me, like just having a hard time trusting folks that, and I got really comfortable with the isolation. It wasn't until I would say 2020 when I met my mentor and I got into her community that I allowed community to be poured back into me and pour into community. And it was finally the time where I was like, oh, I really need this. And what I needed at the time was being able to talk to like minded individuals that were sort of going through the same experiences that I was going through. And I could finally just talk about it. I think during Thailand, the community that I had was very elusive. Not that it was a bad thing, but the nomad life, people come and they go, and you sort of begin to accept the impermanency of relationships through that process, which is a beautiful experience to learn because you already know that's just a metaphor for life. I was able to be present with a lot of those relationships. You could talk about sort of like being the black sheep, going off, traveling, doing all these things, connecting, being connected with being an expat. So I was able to do some of those stuff, but like it wasn't until 2020 where I was able to really dive deep into spirituality, into my rage about certain things, into my abandonment issues. It wasn't until then because then I could just freely talk about some of the really non-normative that word non-normative conversations that you couldn't really have just with anybody. I could say some off the wall things without being judged and then realizing, oh, you were thinking that too? Like, what is going on? So I was able to have those off the wall conversations, which were very much needed in such a very exploratory state of mind. Because between 2020 and sort of now, I was going through sort of an existential, not crisis, existential opening. And nothing in the traditional realm could help me articulate those things. But that community was able for me to articulate some of those things because we had similar beliefs, similar values, and I was able to go deep. So if it wasn't for that community in that time, it would have been more isolation. And I did that isolation already. And um and I feel like those are people that I can actually still go back to if I need if I want it, if I need or have those kinds of conversations or need that kind of connection, I could always go back to that community because some of them I've journeyed with through plant medicines. There's just a level of understanding and connection there um, that um, that is already just understood because you've been there with them. And I think the way they've been mirrors for me, I think my relationship with you has been a very big mirror. That's been a very growth area, child. Maybe one day I'll talk even more about it, but right now we still in it. But that's been a very beautiful mirror for me as I sort of realize that, oh, there's still a little bit of stuff that needs to be worked through. I think the mirroring comes from being able to trust a bit more, being able to um, accept myself in different ways, accept aspects of myself that I may not be very fond of, but being able to say it out loud. I think that has been huge with you. And also seeing where there are things and growth areas that I still need, right? And I think that comes down to the trust stuff, which is still a thing for me. So I move very slow in that process. And so, but I feel like with every relationship, if we're open to really look into it, are opportunities for us to learn and actually, go at our own pace, of course. But being able to lean against that edge and say, wow, I really have a hard time with this. And, and I want to work through that. And so I feel like the way relationships play big mirrors for me is like communication, realizing, oh, I still have a growth area to do in the communication and being able to articulate my feelings in a way that um, uh, develops intimacy and connection. So it's just a constant opportunity to learn and grow. Like it's
Mhm.
just, I think a lot of people, they're like, when can I be done with this? You have to mute yourself.
Uh-huh.
Um, they're like, when do I just stop learning and growing? I hate to say, I want to say the D word, but like that's the only time you stop. It just doesn't stop, right? You can get frustrated. You might not want to participate with it in it in one day, but it doesn't stop. If you want genuine, conscious relationships and connection, and you want a life that's vibrant and alive, then that's the trade off. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I usually go off tangents, but
Yeah, I know you did, and I'd like to add to that a little bit too because I don't know what the D word was. What was the D word?
when you're dead, but even you don't
Oh,
stop growing when you're dead, but that's a whole nother. You still consciousness
I should
continues, but
have.
anyway, that's another conversation.
Um, yeah, I'd like to add to that too because it never stops. It really never stops. However, I will say that over time it feels just a little bit easier. You know, you talked about the part of communication, and for me, that was also a challenge growing up. You know, it was similar to yours where children are seen and not heard. You know, you stay in a child's place type thing. And it wasn't until I'd say maybe late 20s or even more in my sabbatical, 2016 to 2018, where I really felt like I fully stepped into owning my voice, right? And that's kind of where you see that now. So it was hard for me to do that then, and now in our dynamic, it's like you're getting it all the time. And even sometimes still, like, I may not say it right in the moment, I may say it 2 days later or something, but I speak up. So it's always like, no matter, it could be communication, it could be trust, whatever it is, it over time it just feels like it gets a little easier. So yeah, it never stops. As long as you're breathing. It never stops.
Yeah, you're right. It does get easier. And what that just basically means is that you stretch those muscles so your tolerance for those uncomfortable emotions has expanded, you know? And that's really what it means by easier. Your tolerance levels increase. And as your tolerance levels increase, you're able to receive more, give more, and vice versa.
I'd like to ask this because the pattern, as we discovered, where there was you felt overwhelmed, you run to another thing. You felt overwhelmed, you leave to another thing. Like that was the pattern, right? So now in this day, in 2023, how do you feel like you deal with challenging situations or, when you feel overwhelmed? How do you feel like you deal with those now versus back then?
I take out the sage. What do you mean? That's how I do it. I just be like, Lord, nah, nah, nah.
But,
How
but on a more practical level,
I
because
know,
I
I'm
know
messing
that
with
works,
you.
but and
I'm
I don't
messing with you, but I
I
need
ne
it right
I
now.
never I
I need it
never
right now.
say, because I know that's a thing for you more than it is for me. So I would never say it doesn't work. But like on a more practical
Yeah, I know.
level, like
I'm messing with you. It it depends on what it is. And what I mean by that is it depends on the level of intensity. Like um certain challenges I've realized just to allow myself go through the process, meaning allow myself to feel what's going on. Sometimes my immediate reaction is like, oh, right? And I'm like, all right. It's so it's not bizarre, but it because okay, I'm trying to get the words because it's like it's kind of an interesting space to be in because it's like I recognize myself as the human self and the spirit self. So whenever challenges come in, I see how the human part of me reacts, and then my spirit self kind of comes in and tries to balance a lot of those things. And what I basically mean, the human self often, oh, has like this really strong reaction of like things won't get better, and that's the thoughts, right? Oh, this always happens, or things are not going to get better, um or the human mind that doesn't always see a way out of things, but the spiritual self understands like this is just like the ebb and flow of life, the process. So there are times where I know that I'm like succumbing to sort of the human mind, and I sort of sometimes laugh at myself. It's almost like I'm having these sort of dual conversations. And but when those challenges come up, I just allow myself to go through the process and say, okay, what is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I'm what's the feeling behind the feeling? Which is very important for me to understand, like, okay, is it really this surface thing, this surface reaction that I'm having? Or is it something that's a bit deeper connected to something else? And when I give myself time to process that, I can get to the root of it. And I do a lot of journaling or talking with you with it, or talking to another friend of mine about it. And I just sit with those feelings. I try because I'm somebody who default would flee. It's too much. I'll just walk out the door. I'm done with you. I'm done with it all. But now I've learned to I've taught myself how to sit in those uncomfortable emotions and be able to see myself as that, like, not like this bad person, but as a human going through this sort of human experience. And I also connect to my faith. So leaning against God, creator, and asking for assistance, support through this process, asking for the wisdom to help me guide myself through this process as well. And also accepting that a lot of things, regardless of how much they feel, are temporary. They are temporary. I can go through the motions and clam on and cling and hold on and fight or fight with it all, but then I realize this will pass eventually. And then in that moment, I know that I have a choice in how much I fight with something versus me accepting where it is, and also looking at to see, okay, what are the things that I can do and what are the things that I cannot do, and finally coming back to that space of, okay, this is what I can do, and I'm going to focus on the things that I can do versus getting caught up with the stuff that is beyond my control. And I think that's been really a helpful process for me, and a lot of that comes through journaling or talking out loud with myself, or like I said, talking with connected souls about it. And I just went through the motion. I don't know. I know that at the end I'm gonna make it through. I've been through so many different things in my life, and when you've experienced a lot of, I've experienced a lot of death. So going through that, I feel like that's like the ultimate. So it's almost like when you get a flat tire, you're like, yeah, but I went through like the death of some wonderful people in my life. A flat tire, like, you know um or I've been able to go through some of these really hardships, and I've been able to make it through these hardships, and I did the best that I could through these challenges, and that's the best that I could do, and I accept that as the best that I could do. And if there's something that I need to learn more on how to do, then the next step is to take it upon myself to be more proactive, to learn those things and be able to articulate them in whatever way. Okay. And being able to accept a lot of feedback in the process. In the moment, especially if you're overwhelmed and stressed, especially when I'm overwhelmed and stressed, not always being able to hear the feedback, but know that if I take a couple of deep breaths, and if the person that is giving me that feedback, I know it's coming from a place of love, allowing myself to receive that feedback. That's been really crucial. And understanding that me receiving that feedback is not a a hit to my, because the ego plays a lot in our minds. It's not a hit to my who I am as a person inside, but it's like every situation and person that comes into my life, I know is supposed to help me grow. As cliche as it sounds, I always go back to Ram Dass and saying that every situation, like people can come together and help each other become free. That's what he always says. I can allow that process to take place, or I can really hold on to my roles and my narratives and fight myself. I can literally do that. And I think at the end of the day, even through the hardships and the frustrations and the overwhelm, I always come back to the fact that I have a choice. I'm like, I have a choice to sit and just really go through dive deep into the sadness and dive deep into the depression or the anxiety. I can dive deep into all the bad stuff. I have that choice. Or I can accept that, like, this is part of what it means to be human. This is a part of what it means to, I'm gonna get a little esoteric, but this is part of my incarnation. And listening to Ram Dass so much lately because it's been resonating with me. And one of the things that he says is like, I can reject my incarnation here, or I can accept my reincarnation here, whether whatever you believe. But the more that we fight against, the more that we're rejecting a huge part of who we are. And so I've gotten to a place where I've begun to accept a lot of those things, and and that has helped a lot, and has been a really huge journey. It has not been easy, because part of that is also accepting what I'm not. And the ego, again, is going to want to come out and say, I am right, and this is who I am, and this is the role I came to play here. And if I get stuck in that, because I've had my fair share of disappointments, and I realize, oh, Francis, that's just your ego. Your ego's just messing with you right now. Oh, I wanted, I don't know, X amount of this, and I only got this. Ego's messing around with me right now. So I can accept ego to disrupt the journey, right? Or I can just be in the journey. And I feel like that's the next phase of my life right now, is like learning to just be in this journey and be present in this journey versus where I want to see myself. So it's been a wild ride, but I really think community and the relationships I've built over the last few years who mirror that self responsibility, that personal responsibility to say, hey, you have a choice. And I thank you for that too, as well. Because every time I come up with something, you're like, okay, all right, okay, just you just be like chill about it. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. Because I'm a Libra. I'm like, I'm a Libra. I'm like, oh, this is so terrible. Like, I go off the deep end and I come back. I go off the deep end, I come back, right? You know this. So I have those moments too. And then I realize those are just my human moments. And I give myself grace, compassion, and I move on. I get up, not move on the way that I would flee, move on in a way that I accept the light and the dark. And I do the best I can. Now, I don't even know if I answered your question, because at this point, I don't even know what it was.
You know what? It's so funny because every time I ask a question, and this is online or offline, like I'll ask a question, you'll say, and I'll just let you have the airtime, and you're like, "Did I answer your question?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you did like 20 minutes ago," and it's an hour later. Like, so go. But no, you actually did answer my question, and you answered a follow-up question too, which was, what did you learn from, some of those mistakes or mistakes, quote unquote, and failures, which is really acceptance, and something that I kind of like to say, which is like nothing's ever wasted, right? They weren't really mistakes. Obviously we can look at them as being mistakes, but they were all a part of the journey that led you up to, this very moment, and made you stronger in some way, shape, or form. And I think this will like just probably be the last question. I wanna Lily, Samaya always calling us.
She's calling us
I
forward. She's calling us forward. She's calling us
I
in.
I do, because I like to learn. I love to learn about how a person just thinks, and so I'm always asking I'm always asking Lily and friend, okay, so what are you gonna do with that? But I wanted to ask you, like, because it sounds like your journey now really started like in 2020. So over the past, I guess, 3 years or so, like, what do you feel like you've learned the most? Like, how have you changed from then to now? What has been that most transformative process?
That's a great question. Mokar in the chat said we are constantly faced with teachable moments. That's exactly what they are. Teachable moments. And Lily says, mistakes are just getting a PhD in School of Life. One of my favorite quotes is mistakes are proof that you're trying. If you're not out there just messing stuff up, that means you must be a plant or something. I don't know. You're just not, you gotta be, I don't know. Okay. What are the things that I've learned most? Oh man, so many big lessons. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned is that we're all connected. As much as I want to live in my separateness, because the last few years was me working through my rage. First, it was like rage from like parents, abandonment, blah, blah, blah. Then it was like rage against the world and blah, 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 like all the racial stuff and all that stuff. But I realized that we're all connected. And because we're all connected, there is this collective, not collective responsibility, but like this collective compassion, collective empathy, collective kindness. And I've been leaning more into that as a narrative. Like, you are an extension of me and I'm an extension of you. And when I see people acting in ways that might either dishearten me or upset me or make me angry, I'm realizing like that's just like it's a mirror, like, and it can be hard to really look at it through that lens. And because we often want to just like, oh, that's just you. I ain't gotta do nothing with me. But it's like, what can I learn in that moment? How can I manage that situation with a bit more compassion and kindness? So one of the biggest lessons is that we're all connected, and that we're not separate. And another thing is that, it sounds hokey, but like, love is the answer. I don't know. I feel like a damn hippie, but it really is. Like, that's the only neutralizer. If you're not loving, you're hating. If you're selecting, if you're like, oh, I love this, but I don't love that. That's like, it's the same thing. There's like no separation. And I'm also learning more about like just challenging my egoic feelings, recognizing when my ego is there, learning how to just sort of work with versus against. And I'm also um, redefining what success looks like for me. Even when I say that word, it feels so icky. Like, I'm just like, ooh, what is that? It feels like icky because it's just such a matrixy word for me. Because like, what does that mean? But there's also this sort of like achievement dynamic that's always sort of ran a script in the back of my mind. So last few years is like, as I'm sort of like building my business and building the different things that I want to see happen in life, letting go of what that means and what it means to feel whole and complete and joyful and playful, um, and trying to have just more fun with life as much as I can. and not be so serious all the time. Like that's a big one. I think, and I thank you and also Lily, but you guys are just so playful, bringing that play back into my life that I used to have, and just connecting with that. But I think one of the biggest lessons, again, is just we're not separate. This is a collective situation, and what I do impacts you, and what you do impacts me, kind of thing. And that my goal at the end of the day is to leave the world as better than I've found it, in a sense, as corny that might sound to a lot of folks. But it's almost like you're a guest in someone's house. You want to, like, you know put everything back the way it was, in a sense, or even better. Like, you bring a flower, put it on the table. Yeah. So that's really been some of the biggest lessons, and I think a lot of the lessons came from the plant medicine experience, where I was able to sort of dive deep into that process and being shown a lot of different things of that connection, and being able to feel it on a cellular level, and just really, really reconnecting to my faith and spirituality. Those things have just been crucial for me on this journey.
I love that. I also love being in the space. We have our challenges, but just kind of being in the space where I see those changes happening. Um, and it really is beautiful. Like, really is beautiful to see the 2020 you version, or have seen the 2020 version of you, and then the 2023 version of you. And I'm really excited. I'm excited for you, and just continuing along this path and discovering the fullness of who you are. I'm also excited for you to share with us something new that you have launching right now. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about that. I think we have to wrap up, but
Yeah, we got to wrap up because you got something else. Um, Mokar says we have 100% control of our happiness. We do. We control our joy. It's a game changer. Yeah, so I'm launching my community Thrive, which is something I've been wanting to do for a very long time. But again, resistance, fear, self esteem, all that stuff just kind of like overshadowed that experience. And I'm willing to step into that role and really provide a space where me and some other folks who are willing to just go deeper so that we can change our lives. Because I really truly believe that it is possible. And having gone through the experiences that I've gone through, I know it's possible to live a completely different life on the other side of fear, on the other side of depression, anxiety. And so that's what Thrive is: group of folks coming together, committed to overcoming their fears and creating wildly beautiful lives together. Today is the last day to join. It's a closed membership. So once it closes, you won't be able to join until it reopens again. When I don't know whenever that it will be. But you can become a founding member, where you can help me shape some of that community and really put your 2 cents in growing it the way that you see fit, the way that we see fit together. Again, this is a collective experience. So I'm really excited about it. It's new territory for me, so I'm gonna be learning in the process. And I really appreciate those who have said yes so far. And I look forward to connecting with y'all and working closely together as we sort of dismantle some of those narratives that are really holding us back from connecting with ourselves and living the lives that we really truly want to live.
awesome. Is there any last words that you'd like to share, especially with the generation coming up now? It's definitely different from our generation, and social media is like it's their bread and butter. And you know, is there anything you'd like to share with this generation about their personal development journey, and really tapping inward, or looking inward into finding the answers rather than outward?
Yeah, lots to say, but I'll keep it short. It just kind of reminds me of the recent conversation I had with my son, who's sort of going through, sort of, reconnecting with himself and what he wants to do with life. And the best thing I could say is be authentic, and then find any barriers within you that get in the way of that authenticity. We sometimes want to externalize or like look outside to see what's stopping us, but it really is what's being stopped within us that gets in the way of that authenticity. Find any way that you can be authentic, because it's from that authenticity that everything else will grow. The joy will grow, the alignment will grow, and connecting to whatever it is that you're here to do will grow. All of that comes from authenticity. And forge your own path. A lot of people have certain expectations of us, of what they think we should do, what we need to do, and they can't influence that, because we have our own unique blueprint. I always say, talk about that, and honor your own unique blueprint and honor your own pace. Don't worry about Joe Schmo, what they're doing with whatever it is that they're doing, because they have a different karmic path and you have yours, and you need to honor that. So I would say authenticity, obviously integrity, and and I forgot the other one, but yes, authenticity, integrity, and just do what you want to do. Do you. Seriously, you do you, everything else will come full circle. You will attract the people in your life that are equally authentic, and you will um you just be able to navigate life better. It comes from that authentic place. But when you're wearing the mask, that's when all that conflict begins. So just be you, do you, and do it the best that you can. Yeah.
I love that. Absolutely beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Francis, for having me as your moderator or interviewer or co-host or
Guest
whatever you
host.
want to
Guest
call it, guest
host.
host. Yeah, all of that. Thank you so much. It
Well,
was it was fun.
thank you for getting on this with me, this journey, and asking all these beautiful questions. And I hope y'all got a little bit more insight, sort of, on my journey. And hopefully, if you have any other questions, you can always DM me. I talk to everybody as much as I can, or send me an email. And thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing in the chat on IG. If you're catching the replay, thank you for catching the replay. And I hope to see you in Thrive. And I go live every Wednesday, so I'll be here again on Wednesday, just doing what I do. And enjoy the rest of your night and evening. And talk to you soon. Bye.